Okay, good morning. My name is Simon Ho. I'm from Hong Kong, from the Tencent University of Hong Kong. So welcome to the day 2 of the CGHE annual conference. So yesterday I already, I think, met many of you, while we are have a drink and food. So today we are very, very excited to have such a special panel organized by our university, Tencent University of Hong Kong, and also the Asia Pacific Higher Education Research Partnership, mainly led by my colleague, Professor Ho Mok. Now, today we have a very, selected topic about geopolitics and higher education in East Asia. Also, we have a subtitle about international student mobility, research collaborations, and university governance. So before I invite each of the panelists to give not more than 10-minute sharings, I just want to give a little background what I see about the background. So as you may recall, about say 20-some years before, so before we mention about globalization or internationalization of higher education, I think most countries are trying to be increasing the higher education participation rate. Also, they try to allow more people more equal opportunity to go to university. Right? So at that time, it's not so kind of competitions, not much about about the market, about worldwide kind of mobility. All right, but they try to enhance the domestic or national productivity. So they try to make most institutions more or less similar. Right? But by time, I think this whole thing has been changed. You can see. So I think in the last 20-some years, we talk a lot about globalization and internationalization of higher education. So sometimes when we talk about globalization, internationalization, that also means we increase competition, we increase productivity, we ask faculty members to publish more, and also we encourage our students to go outside, and many institutions try to attract more overseas students for whatever reason, and we have promote research collaborations. Unfortunately, we also have to enter into the world university ranking games, no matter whether you like it or not. I think that will change the whole landscape of higher education over the last 20-some years. So today, I think we also see after the COVID-19, I think it's a divider of many things. All right. Also, the recent geopolitics tensions between the giant powers, they also affect the international mobility, international collaborations, and also even about the university governance systems. So today we are very, very proud to have 7 very distinguished panelists to join us and share their thought about their latest observation, what are the impact of all these external factors on our higher education in the East Asia sector, in the East Asia region. So I would invite each of them to give not more than 10 minutes presentation. I think they can come out and also share their PowerPoint if they have the slides. Right? And then we have about 25 minutes free discussion, Q&A. Right? So without further ado, I would suggest we invite our first panelist, Professor Simon Marginson, to give his presentation.
Well, thank you, Simon. And thank you, Ho, for organising this and getting us together and doing so much as you have for the Centre for Global Higher Education since its inception, since you gave the keynote at the first conference at UCL. Global geopolitics, I think, simply is understood as relations of power in the global and regional scale. The question of what is a global view or global perspective is something which has energized us in Centre for Global Higher Education since the beginning. But I think for me, it includes a capacity to understand the world's regions together, their interdependency, their differences, and similarities, and also to understand the world as a single subject, as a whole. the ecological vision of the world as a single, if you like, a single problem solution, and the more sophisticated social version, which says the world can be a political subject. We can understand the world as a single political subject, with all of us having some interest in it. And it's that perspective I'm going to speak from, rather than from within the region. So I want to talk about the region within within the global, if you like. The big problem for many of us who are fascinated by higher education, science, knowledge in East Asia has been to get other people to be fascinated by it. And in the almost the decade since CGHE began, I think, a fulsome engagement with scholars in East Asia, probably the only region outside Europe where CGHE was heavily involved from the beginning. I still haven't seen much change in the awareness of East Asia and East Asian countries, individual countries, and their differences and similarities within the Western scholarly component of CGHE. I haven't seen much shift. I haven't seen much excitement or interest, despite the many opportunities. And that's a puzzle to me, because when you actually look at the role of the East Asian countries, and here I include, I suppose, what I would call the Chinese civilizational zones. I realise that's a controversial concept, and I'll get to that point too in a moment. But you know, what I would call, you know, the countries which have some roots in the Confucian and associated traditions, although of course there are many divergences and differences and indigenous elements as well, as the Chinese ones, but commonality and written language was very important in that, of course, historic. But if you look at the Chinese civilizational zone alone, and you look at the sort of scale of its science and higher education now, you realise that it's impossible not to take it very seriously and centrally. Let's look at two charts. First, just to make the point about multipolarity. Here we have the world science system. This English language scopeless science. This is not everything, all knowledge, all the non-English language knowledge, nearly all of it's outside that. But just what's been published in the recognised global systems, North America and the other Western countries, mostly Europe, dominate the world in 2003. By far the majority, almost 3/4 of all the science is coming from the West. So the notion of Western centrality is, if you like, very easy to demonstrate in a superficial way from that chart. Even though what was happening in the non-Western zone was growing quickly, even then. And then you look at only 19 years later, look at this. How the non-Western world is now the majority of science. And of course, there's all the work that's being done outside English as well. So it's a different world now. And in the case of region, oops, I'm on the right. Yeah. It's just not very. That's it. Well done. So let's look at the weight of East Asia alone, the Chinese civilizational zone, which I include Vietnam in that because of the Confucian roots. Singapore, which again is controversial in Singapore, but that to me seems a post-Confucian society, and certainly in education, very similar dynamic to that which is unfolded in Japan first, and then China, Korea. Accelerated development. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Vietnam, China, together overwhelmingly bigger than Europe. The next count, the 2024, if Trump hasn't destroyed the statistical capacity of the National Science Foundation, which collected this data, 2024 will show a bigger gap between Europe and East Asia. And it's soon, North America, Europe combined will be smaller than East Asia. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. And of course, it's the great growth in China is driving that, but it's not just China. So it really is a very important region. And if you look at numbers of students, you look at the quality of institutions, you look at the presence of these large layers of top class universities in all of the components of the region except Vietnam. The Singapore universities, the two research universities, absolutely astonishing what they've achieved in their sort of 50-year trajectory. And South Korea and Taiwan and Japan have got really strong research university sector, and of course China is gigantic now and also high achieving. So it's really, the university as an institution in East Asia is looking very healthy in some respects, healthier than elsewhere. Perhaps the only other place where it's relatively healthy is Western Europe, or parts of Western Europe. And of course, there is this absolutely astonishing STEM phenomenon in China. When you're on the video about the screen, isn't it? On the left side, that's high citation science in all disciplines, including medical, where the Anglophone countries are still the leaders. And Zhejiang is now above Tsinghua in high citation papers, who would have thought. And the Chinese universities do extremely well. Singapore in the next clutch of 5 or 6, Nanyang and National University of Singapore are both there. So they're both in the top 20. On this side, we've just got the physical sciences and engineering, and it's just, it's China's table. MIT is the last one listed, and it's there. And go back 6 years, MIT is #1. So that's how things have changed and how quickly it's happening. And every count seems to, register a further development along these lines. So yeah, STEM in China, the maths and computing table from Leiden is the same as this one. In the Leiden Earth and Life Sciences, China is now the majority of the universities in the top 15. And if you look at medical, biomedical and health, where China was, and East Asia generally was outside the list for a very long time. Now there's 3 Chinese universities in the top 15. So that's changing quickly too, even in medical and clinical, which were, as I said, dominated by Harvard and other big Anglophone schools. So, you can't ignore this, can you? And the notion of decoupling from this is also kind of manifestly absurd, isn't it? How can you ignore all that science? So, but getting people to take that seriously has been a struggle, and university presidents have often been quicker than faculty. Faculty are outside the spheres where we're working with people in East Asia. It's just that now, a majority are what to do. So, multipolarities here, East Asia's here. It's not just about China. It was Japan that was the pioneer of accelerated development in the modern economy and society in general, but also in higher education and in knowledge and science. In the 19th century, and again after 1945, absolutely astonishing, miraculous development in Japan. And Japanese universities in the 1970s, 80s, into the 90s were really at the forefront of things. And I think it was just when the Japanese economy seized up and the funding seized up along with it, that process was slow, but the core of Japanese research and science and higher education is really strong and can spring back. And there's been some interesting movement in the last couple of years in terms of funding in Japan. So we have our fingers crossed. Tohoku is doing great. It's been going up and up and up in Japan. So not everyone has been struggling as much as I've said, but funding has been the constraint. And I think in Taiwan, funding's been a constraint as well. In the last 15 years or so, things have been slower in Taiwan than they have been elsewhere in the China's in terms of development. Hong Kong has certainly kicked along, and China itself and Macau. So, but Japan, as well as China, we need to think about South Korea. Now, South Korea is a really interesting country. It's, as we all know, it's culturally very exciting. It's politically now, despite recent events, relatively stable, and it's a society which is both dynamic in the capitalist sense, but also quite relatively egalitarian in lots of ways in the social policy sense. And there's a balance between the regions and the provision of higher education, which is impressive. South Korea hasn't really pushed to the very, very peak in terms of world-class university development. It hasn't tried to do what NUS or Tsinghua have done, in their different systems. But Seoul National is just in a special position. Of course, it's the place you go to if you want to be on the accelerated beltway for life. It's the pathway. It's the pathway to stellar careers, especially in government. But
2 minutes.
yeah. It's correct. The strength of South Korea is the middle level, I think, and the spread of research institutions and research capacity right across the public and private sectors. But let me emphasise the South Korea, like China, like Japan, very strong sense of its own identity as a political force. And one of the things that's happening now with the decoupling between US and China, the tremendous pressure the State Department of the US has placed on all the West European and other Western systems to adopt a securitisation of research, to put everything through risk management, to problematise links with China. Korea was completely stood aside from that. And I've just seen a paper on this. Korea has not changed its policy in relation to risk management and research. There's been no movement in that direction whatsoever. It's dealing with China and science in China exactly as it was 10 years ago. There's been no shift. And I thought that was really mature and really healthy. And, they're not making a big fuss about it. They're not proclaiming their neutrality or something. They've got links to the US are really strong in Korea in science and higher education. But they are maintaining really strong links into China and treating everyone fairly and equally. And I think this is really intelligent. And you'd hope that more and more countries are going to do this and just stand aside from the geopolitical conflict which is developed. It's not just about China. Now, I suppose very quickly, seeing I don't really have any time left at all, common cultural roots, but important differences. The common roots, I think, across the region are the strong state, a partly collective attitude in society, which is different to the Western individualism, the ultra-individualism of the Anglophone world especially, a willingness to band together in crisis, but also in normal times as well. The West can band together in crisis to a degree, but in East Asia, people work together naturally better in between times. And there's not the same anti-statism is not apparent, that the state is seen as the repository of everyone's collective interest to a larger extent than is the case in the West. And I mean, of course, there's exceptions to that, and there's also ways in which there's skepticism about the state as well still, but there is more commitment to working together and living together in an effective way, and that's really important. And that manifests itself in higher education as well, and in especially the respect for the state as an instrumentality and the capacity of the state to build rapidly is partly depends on its capacity to mobilise people's affect and their commitment. And so you get this accelerated development in all the countries except Vietnam at this stage in higher education and science at different points. There's been this tremendous surge and great growth. The Confucius of cultivation in the home, the commitment to education is profound in the region, greater than anywhere else in the world, right through the whole population, top to bottom, not just an upper middle class passed on. And that commitment to education means that students are generally pretty better prepared than anywhere else in the world. And that's true of all the countries in the region, including Vietnam, where they're coming out of a strong school system with a tremendous teaching profession. But also differences. And politically, it's impossible to see regionalisation really taking root in a formal political sense in the way that it has in Europe. And of course, if it did, that will be profoundly important and influential on the world as a whole, and then perhaps the region might start to think about global architecture and remaking the world as a whole. And I think that's really important and necessary to do, but that's not immediately within reach. And while the countries in the region remain politically quite separated, that will be difficult that kind of project will be difficult to get going. And of course, there's a profound problem about regionalisation in the sense that China is so big that if, regionalisation works better when you've got some balance between the players. Like in Europe between France and Germany and UK when it was there. And in any regionalisation in East Asia, it's kind of almost a matter of China trying to hold back and not dominate too much. And that problem occurs in Asia and a bit with Indonesia, but because Indonesia hasn't been particularly assertive, not particularly right on the cutting edge, that problem hasn't really arisen in Asia yet. But it is a problem. It means regionalisation politically in East Asia probably is more difficult, if not impossible, to achieve in the foreseeable future. But there's a lot of bottom-up cooperation. And when you look at the figures on research collaboration and on student mobility, you see how much is going on within the region. There's natural affinity, geographical proximity, there's lots of common culturally. And it's not just mainland students going everywhere, which does happen. It's also the other parts of the region as well. I think the future, just to close, the future of higher education in many ways rests now on what happens in East Asia. We know there's a crisis in the US sector. I mean, we haven't talked about that directly here much. We might talk about it in the last session today. But it's profound, and I mean, the half of American politics is now gunning for the universities, going for them, trying to bring them down as independent cultural, social, political, economic forces, trying to subordinate. And that's a different kind of America to the ones which we've experienced in our lifetimes up to now. It means that the American system is no longer a model. So where are the models for the future of higher education? There in two places, there in Western Europe, where the tradition is strong and very healthy in lots of ways, in places like Germany, Netherlands, the Nordic countries, and Switzerland, Austria. In the richer parts of Western Europe, the university is tremendously good and strong at this point of time, but also East Asia. And that makes the relationship between the two, and not all of the West is necessarily on the American bandwagon in relation to China. And I think that has to be thought about carefully. Although the US dragged the EU into the decoupling process, it hasn't dragged it all the way. So I think there's potential there for things to evolve differently in future. But the relationship between East Asia, Western Europe, and the university sector now is quite pivotal, potentially. But if there's no good relationship with Europe, East Asia itself is going to be very strong. If the East Asian model becomes dominant in higher education, then the classical Humboldtian form has been embedded in a stronger state control tradition. But Humboldt, and I think the Humboldtian idea is still a very good idea in lots of ways. What we need to think about first when we think about what kind of universities we want. The Humboldtian idea, as it was originally conceived, was three things. Universities serve the state. Right? That was the starting premise. Humboldt's University of Berlin was a blueprint for the state. Second, universities are wholly autonomous as institutions in doing this. They're trusted by the state. They're trusted by the state to carry out their responsibility. And third, that they're organised, and this flourishes later in the 19th century in Germany, they're organised on the basis of freedom to learn, freedom to teach, and freedom to inquire. And I think if that combination of commitment to the state and society, unambiguous commitment, autonomy, and freedoms can be carried through in the East Asian model, the East Asian universities will remake the world.
Thank you, Simon. Definitely, there are common things, cultural root of East Asian countries, and also there are also their unique local challenges. Now, next, I would like to invite Professor Wenqin Shen from the Peking University of China to give us sharing.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, we share my thought about the geopolitical impact on student mobility. I will focus on doctoral education level. First, you can see that doctoral mobility benefit China a lot. For example, in Beijing University, for example, in my university, our new faculty members, about 70% of them is the Chinese. From the United States, UK, Germany, and other Western countries. So it helps China a lot. And also, Chinese made a great contribution to devising the Chinese science that Simon just talked about. He published a lot, but if you look at the data, PhD Vietnamese made a great contribution to this development. For example, there's research show that more than 13% of the Chinese papers with PhD Vietnamese from the United States. So the relationship between China and the United States made a huge impact on Chinese, on the rising of the Chinese science, as Simon just mentioned. So this chart shows the trend of Chinese student mobility into the United States. If you look at the data, you can, before the COVID-19, Chinese students, a number of students are growing before COVID-19 COVID. After that, there's a small decline into the United States. The figure is not very bad, but if you look at the data issued by Chinese universities, it's a different picture. This is the data disclosed by Chinese universities. It shows that, for example, in Peking University, for example, in 10 years ago, in 2014, about 30%, right, 28% of our BA degree holders will go abroad for graduate education, for master degrees or doctoral degrees. That's a huge number of them, right? Go to the Western countries. But 2 years ago, it's a 17%. It's a 10% cut. So it's a huge cut of number who are study abroad. It happens also in Taiwan University. In Taiwan University, 2 years ago, that's 14%. But before that, there's 23. So it's a huge decline of students going abroad. If you look at the universities who did some military research, for example, Wenqin University or Harbin Institute of Technology, 2 years ago, just 5% of them go abroad. And also Xianzhou Tong, 7%. So it means that in elite universities, students, the percentage of them are declining very fast who study abroad. And if you look at the destination, it also a big change. For example, Xiamen University, for example, in Xiamen University or not, also a very big university in China. In 2019, 29% of them go abroad. And American was the first destination. But if you look at the data on 2022, that's 70% go abroad. And United States is the third destination, not the number one. So who's the number one destination? Number one, UK. And second one is Singapore. So those students, they are strictly that destination, not destination. So that's a huge changing, I think. Also look at the data at Jilin University, also another 985 university. Before COVID, 26% of them go abroad, and number one was the United States. But in 2022, that's 11% go abroad for graduate studies. And the United States become the fourth destination. So you can see there's a huge change in terms of percentage of students who go abroad and in terms of the generation who they choose, where they choose to study. And also, we look at data about non-degree mobility. As you all may know, Chinese government funds students research visit. They give money to them. They spend some time abroad, for example, 6 months or even 2 years in Western countries. And this is our national survey data. You can see that in 2021, there is 70% of them with international experience during their adult studies. It means that they graduate in 2021. So during that time, 70% of them have international experience. They spend 6 months or 2 years in a Western university. But last year, just 8.7% of them have international basic experience. That's a huge decline. So why is so? Why so? Because before the COVID or before the Trump administration, most of the students will go to the United States for non-degree mobility. But if you look at the data, you can see that the opportunity in the United States is not as before. So if you look at the data, 2021, United States the #1 destination for non-degree mobility. But you can see there's a huge decline of students going to the United States for non-degree mobility. And nowadays, United States is not the #1 destination for for non-degree mobility. But EU, if you look at its region, EU surpassed the United States for Chinese students of non-degree mobility. And UK also declined, but not declined so much compared to the United States. So we can see that there's a shifting destination of Chinese students. Normally it's quite stable, but the United States decline a lot. And also very interesting to know that a lot of students also go to Malaysia for graduate programs, and many of them go there for PhD degrees also. And this is according to our review, why they change destination. For students who want to get PhD degree abroad, United States is still the #1 choice. They want to go to the United States because they want United States the center of learning. They did the best research in many fields, but because they can't go to the United States, they choose to go to other countries. For example, Singapore was the one choice. And also, we find that there's a mismatch between the data disclosed by United States and the data disclosed by Chinese universities. If you look at the data disclosed by Chinese university, you can see there's a huge pride of students go abroad among Chinese elite universities. But if you look at the data disclosed by American agency, for example, IOE, you can see the picture is quite not so bad, right? But I think this is something wrong here. I believe that Chinese data is more valid, more reliable because it's collected by Chinese universities. So what happened? Maybe one possible alternative source of this increase could be Chinese students who complete their undergraduate studies abroad, because a lot of students they receive their degree in not just in the United States. They go to France, go to Germany, go to Japan for degrees. And those students, they will apply to graduate programs to the United States also. Maybe that's the reason why the data has not looked as so bad in the American agency. So very brief summary. First, there is the influence of geopolitical factors. The mobility of students, adult students in the United States, is shrinking a lot for students in Chinese state universities. The national survey data show that both degree and non-degree mobility to the United States has shown a clear downward trend in recent years. It's a huge cut, numbers and percentage. Second, the geographic structure of mobility is being reshaped. The United States, a traditional major destination, in severe decline. While the Japanese countries such as the UK, Japan, Singapore, remain stable or even increase. Third, as the scientific research strength of Chinese university continue to increase, as Simon just mentioned, we are doing good job in published highly cited papers, and the research capacity have increased. So more and more undergraduate students from any university they choose to stay in China for degrees. Lastly, since data mobility play a key role in scientific research system in China and United States, if we change in mobility patterns, we have a significant impact on the scientific system of both countries and international scientific research collaboration. Because scientific research collaboration was built on education networks. Students get degrees from UK, United States, they come back to China, and they keep on research collaboration with their supervisors and their colleagues. That's what international cooperation. So I think this change of the capability will not have a huge impact on higher education system, but will also have a very huge impact on research system globally. That's thank you very much.
Thank you. Change in the student mobility. Now, let's invite Professor Yonezawa from the Tohoku University of Japan for the presentation. Also, 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Akiyoshi, and thank you so much to involving me here. Thank you, Kambo, and all David and committee. And I will start from the introduction that one movie, documentary movie that was nominated Oscar this year called "Making Japanese" through the primary interface. That was directed by the young Japanese director called Emma Ryuan Yamazaki, and she has a further professor, and she went to the Canadian high school in Kobe, near Osaka, and then she got a degree in New York University. So she's a really kind of international person, and also it's very very interesting that most of the message of this documentary is that how to learn how to behave as Japanese in the primary school. But occasionally in this school, that there are some students who have the international family background appearing as a part of this kind of the kind of making the kind of national citizenship. And long time ago, we had a kind of the outset that why Japan succeeded in a very early stage, that one of the very interesting book was written by the Professor Will Cummings, who is a very, very important person in a comparative study of the East Asian education. And he also made a similar message in a primary school in Japan. And also the Professor Donald Doerr, who used to be the Institute of Education professor, and he wrote a book of the British factory and the Japanese factory, means that how the Japanese society trying to make kind of common communication. So in the Japanese factory in the 1970s, that the director or the president of the factory go to the canteen and then eat with the normal ordinary factory workers. And this was impossible at the time in Britain, I don't know. But anyway, and then it was theorized by the Harvard Business School professor Takeuchi and Ikujiro Nonaga, which was professor at the knowledge creating company, which means that the knowledge is possessed by the organization for the group, not to the individual. That is the idea what we have in the Japanese economy a long time ago. But this situation has facing a big crisis because this means that that we invested a lot of money and also a lot of the time for the training to be a Japanese, to be a Japanese citizen, and it takes a lot of cost. So from that point of view, that it is quite natural that from 1990s that we are fighting with the continuous decline of the youth population because of low birth rate, and it's more or less the same in all of the East Asian countries. And South Korea is the worst. Actually, maybe until 2040, the number of the youth population will become a half if they cannot get the migration from other countries. And then what can we do? One is that we would like to ask one woman to work more, And this is the woman mix very called. And the bottom book is how to foster the human resources of the professional workers, female, under the Goldman Sachs system, and that was kind of one of the popular book in Japan. And also the other the book is for asking the old people to work, and this is also treated as a kind of seriously within the national central government. And then finally what we had in the tradition is that, for example, if you are a worker of the Mitsubishi, we think that they are a member of the Mitsubishi group, so for long time, for lifetime. But that is now changing. For example, the Hitachi, who has a kind of produced train in the UK, and they are much more like thinking about kind of job-based employment, that's like other countries. What to do? Yeah. Okay, sorry, thank you. And then it is really the great that to have the professor project group. Here are the professor of the Administration of Japanese Studies of Ho Mok. And he did a very good, interesting work in 1990 that how the returnees of the people who did a kind of high school life, private school life outside of Japan, and somehow get a kind of special treatment, get into the Japanese university, and try to be expected. They are expected to be a kind of the channel between the international community and the Japanese community. And that is now becoming much more wider the scope. That there are many different types of the mobility and the kind of connection among the Japanese and the international community. And also another the book is again the Professor Kariya. He was also the professor of the International National Institute until the last year, and he made a kind of caution from the Oxford that Oxford is a truly global university, and the Tokyo University, so that's the main message. Okay. Then because of this situation, what we are trying to do is anyway to promote the international student mobility. The center is that quite easy that we want to increase the number of the international students, including the Japanese language school students, from the 300,000 to the 400,000 within 10 years, and it will be achieved. But the last one is much more difficult because this is an idea that we want to make more than double the Japanese students who have some kind of international study experiences. By making a benchmark of the France and Germany, where the nationalism is arising quite rapidly. And then this is very, very interesting document. It is a policy document, not my idea, that how we have a kind of international strategy, that what geographical area we want to have, what kind of person, and what kind of student experience we want to have. And in a nutshell, that available in Japanese on the website. And in a nutshell, that we have a very strong tie with East Asia. So more than half of the international students in Tokyo University are the Chinese, and Chinese citizens. So and we want to continue to maintain this kind of tie. But at the same time, though, we want to have much more balance. So this means that we want to increase the number of the student intake from the other area like India or Africa or the Mongolia. And also as the Western country, we want to have much more student exchange, mutual student exchange. This means that we don't want to be a kind of commercial customer of the country, but much more try to have a kind of mutual experience and get into the kind of inner circle of research capacity. And if we go to the research area, that is become much more apparent that we are really trying to get a kind of connection with the G8 and G7. And then the idea is quite simple, that we want to have the balance between the academic autonomy freedom and also the research security and the individual integrity. And there, I think that it's still allowed to say something about the DI in the United Kingdom, but anyway, the situation is in Japan and the context of DI in Japan. We just had Tohoku University just had a kind of declaration of the DI last year. The idea is highly connected to the international, the industry of development or the engagement in society, rather than the kind of the message like the Black Lives Matter. So that is quite different context what we have. And then under this condition, the DI in Japan has still very, very under recognized of the global citizenship and inclusive higher education. And also as the institutional level, we are still, but it is emerging that we have much more collaborative learning or the service learning. This is becoming much more popular and things. In a nutshell, we have three conclusions. One is that first of all, that we are faced with geographic pressure, demographic pressure, and we are trying to make active student mobility under the banner of the diversity and possibly equity and inclusion in the end. Then the alliance with the United States is still the key, but we wanna have much more some kind of national autonomy, how to choose the partnership, but not really so drastic like South Korea. And then the anti-establishment, the sentiment and the populism are there, and this is also sharing other kind of stuff for us. Thank you so much.
Okay, now the democratic challenges are common to many East Asian countries. I think we are finding our way to, how to see to find solutions. Now, next, our speaker is Professor Joshua Ho Mok from Hansen University of Hong Kong.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Simon, for opening the panel today, setting out about what happens in East Asia, not only about China, and China is only part of the family in Asia, and precisely Simon highlighted about East Asia. And also thanks, Aki, for highlighting the importance when we are dealing with globalization in education or internationalization in education about the laws about diversity. Colleagues, I think we are so fortunate today enjoying beautiful season and also very quiet environment that we can engage in dialogue about the issue of common interest. But don't forget, we are living in a world of division. We are really facing the challenge about divided world. As educators, as researchers, as intellectuals, what's core to our business about research and scholarship is about helping people to know more about cultures. And we are truly living in a multicultural and multipolar world. No matter you admit it or not, this is a reality. So we set out about the talk that I would like to briefly highlight observing time, because some colleagues has already discussed about the issue. I just focus more on the Chinese government's response. And I won't go into all detail regarding about the theory, discussing about how geopolitics has shaped and impacted on higher education development in the last decade or so. But indeed, I think these are the key issues we are facing. My good friend Simon has made it very clear. We are facing the intensified, economic rivalry, rapid technological innovation, ideological polarization among the leading global powers, which shape the landscape of higher education that you and I are working or studying in. I think the world is divided. World leaders are also be put in a very challenging position by addressing the foreign field issues and how to address about the tension, the intrinsic challenge to balance about the four aspects. They are inherent academic missions of open inquiry, cross-border collaboration, pressures to safeguard national interest, and at the same time also take care about the political demands or also national interest. It's never been easy, but I'm glad that I'm not a politician. I'm a researcher, I'm an educator. I think you bring back home about the key issue when we do research. We want to help our younger generation to know about the world from a more multiple angles, comparative dimension, having more understanding about the cross-cultural world. This is crucial to our business. Today, I just present to you China, indeed, historically, as my friend has highlighted, benefit a lot from interaction, not only in the West, but also other parts of the world. Because Chinese government, when New China was founded, realizing the importance about knowledge, but because of the different political regime, at that time, it was so difficult to drive higher education development. But after economic reform started in 1980s, opening up of China, not only economically, but the Chinese governments realized the importance about education and keep investing in education. My friends, yesterday we finished with a wonderful plenary debating about the funding policy of higher education in the UK. But I draw a big contrast to you. Last month in China, Beijing successfully held the National Congress. At the conclusion of the meeting, one of the major investments as concluded by this National Congress is about education. The Chinese government is very determined and realize about the importance about people. People is not about giving the well-being livelihood, but quality people. And realizing about the world is so challenging, investing in education becomes one of the major agenda set out by this National Congress. Not only about education, talk about healthcare, managing older people, because China, just like other economies in the world, face a lot of challenges when people become older. Congratulations, longevity, but it's so challenging to manage, including me as I went through downwards. So these are some of the issues that, how can I move on? So I think the duality of collaboration and competition is something core to the landscape of China. And the duality of collaboration and competition refer to Chinese students and scholars have become integral to the academic and financial success of many Western universities. So if you look into the statistics and also the historical records during the COVID period, when those costs and mobility was, affected, disrupted, and many jurisdictions, especially major universities around the world, dependent heavily on international students coming from India or China, would face significant, downturn in terms of the finance. And concern also about the intellectual property threat is core to the business of today's theme, geopolitics, being played out and have an impact on security issues. Secularization becomes one of the major pieces driving about collaboration or disrupting collaboration globally. But in responding to this kind of not very favorable environment, my government in China has promoted domestic innovation and self-reliance to reduce the reliance on other partnerships based in the West and further complicated the landscape of academic exchange. But indeed, I think if we draw from the historical perspective, Chinese regime before PRC began taking education, overseas learning, modernization, learning from the West as a path. I think it's nothing really new when we are talking about sending our students. It goes back to the Cheng dynasty. Chinese government at that time began about sending students away and also try to learn the good practices elsewhere to fix some of the problems locally. And the current state of the Chinese and the West relationship could be influenced as a strategic interdependence amid the mounting geopolitical tensions. I don't think China will stop, not only investing in domestic educational system, and I think Chinese government is still very keen in collaboration with other partners if they are willing to do so. Because some of the commentators internationally at some point predict or projected that China will close the door again, talking that China will reduce the emphasis on international education. Though my colleagues has mentioned the number of students has gone down, there are plenty reasons contributing to that. Bear in mind, my friends, after the COVID economic conditions in China is not that sensational when compared to global economy. Family will be looking into their pockets to see whether to send their kids. If they're able to go to very good university domestically, they stay on. If not, they may go to other places they found safe. Remember, during the COVID, many of the Asian students experienced so-called discrimination because of public health crisis issue. And so family and individual now, they take very seriously talking about overseas learning, not necessarily going to the Western society as before, because of the violence, because of the political issue, because of discrimination, and not to say about some international media reporting cases when students carrying valid visa being denied in major immigration port, I don't name countries. But these are the issues being digested domestically in China when students think about overseas learning. But indeed, the impact on international mobility has declined a bit, but China remains one of the most important sending out countries in the world. And at the same time, Chinese government want to diversify the learning, not only going to the West, but now more working on other parts. Here, I just want to highlight Chinese government has never been stopping talking about collaboration, but not necessarily with the traditional West. If they are happy, they are not happy to work with them. So the Chinese government bring out a long strategy, very strategic in terms of the Belt and Road Initiative, and also the ASEAN and also Africa. So I'm privileged to join one of the projects funded by British Council, my friend here, with Coventry, working. The focus is about UK universities partnership and research and exchange with the ASEAN university, and also look into how the big three, Japan, Korea, and China respond to that. And the findings highlight Chinese university has a very strong relationship with ASEAN university in terms of partnership, publication, and research well before the COVID. And this is one of the strategies not to put all the eggs in the same basket, being taken on as a national strategy by Chinese government. And the impact on not only about students and also the research collaboration, I think Chinese government is very strategic, knowing about being the second largest economy in the world based upon manufacturing will no longer take China for a long while. So advancing technology and how to drive entrepreneurship in education and entrepreneurship-led, curriculum be, designed and, put out in the last 10 years. It's not suddenly happened because of the COVID. Indeed, when you look into the success story about the 40 years of Shenzhen, could give you some kind of a screen. You're looking about the transformation of China in terms of innovation-driven technology, knowing that advancing technology-led economy is so important. And now we see more collaboration, not necessarily in the traditional West, but also other places. At the same time, I just want to make some final remarks. And Chinese government is very strategic. In my recent work published in 2023, Globalizing China, I mentioned about Chinese government adopt a three-point approach. domestically strengthening about the university to make them more worldly competitive, as Simon highlighted about ranking or publications. Regionally engaging with ASEAN and also other people there with the same mind for strengthening about the collaboration, not to say about the Belt and Road. But domestically, I think don't lose sight about the recent development about the Greater Bay Area development. That means the Guangdong area, the Chinese government is very keen to engage university from Hong Kong to work collaboratively for making GBA a strong area. This is a region just like learning the experience for Tokyo Bay, Florida Bay, and Boston Bay experience with a cluster of very intensive university with good research, bringing in the transformation of the industry and also making it a stronger innovation hub. So I come to my conclusion. I think the last 2 points I want to say is about we are facing about the challenges that we outline about geopolitical dimension with strategic mistrust or secularization have fragmented our relationships in sensitive fields, threatening the openness of the global academic networks. But I think as a community of learners or researchers, we have to reconfirm and reaffirm the commitment to openness and global dialogue. And higher education, as we are doing, can transcend political divides and continue to serve as a vital conduit for cultural exchange, scientific progress, and mutual understanding. I myself, if you agree with us, is so privileged to have the opportunity working in higher education sector, have a role to shape the research agenda and helping the younger generation to learn about the world. But core to us is about we are facing the challenges that we cannot deal with it overnight, but we have to find alternative model of international academic collaboration, creatively thinking about regional academic hub, digital platforms, and virtual academic exchanges in order not to stop about the meaningful interactions among people. Because after all, we have to create a better world. Hopefully we can nurture our future generations. They care not only about the career development, this is very important. They care the broader society. They become a responsible global citizen. So thank you very much.
Okay. Yes. Now we have another speaker, Professor Angela Hao from the National CGHE University of Taiwan. Angela, your turn. I think Angela is online and now is in Taipei.
Thank you, Angela.
You can turn on your microphone. Angela, you have to turn on your microphone. Angela, I think she cannot hear from us. Please turn on our speakers.
So how about our successor here?
Here.
So could you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine, right? Okay, so let me use my PowerPoint. Sorry, a little bit disrupted.
I need louder.
Yes. Wait a little bit. Share it.
Maximum.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, Angela, you may continue.
All right. Thank you so much for your invitations, and it's really an honor to join this excellent panel. So I mean, today I'm very, very happy to share you some of my observations about these issues, geopolitical tensions, even geopolitics. How about the impacts on policy shifts in Taiwan higher education? I think previous speakers also talk about the impact of geopolitics and how exactly it's really impact the higher educations in your own context, and definitely higher education institutions. It means in Taiwan, of course, it's not only views as educational institutions, but in a certain way, it's a very, very political project. So it means that sometimes they have to serve the whole system in a certain way, has been affected by the global power dynamics and democratic relationships, as well as some ideological tenets. So, of course, definitely geopolitical forces really impact the very dimension education including transnational education, international education, and of course, the Taiwan is one of the contexts being affected by that. So, as you know, East Asia, Taiwan is one of the highly regulated system, higher education. So we always been, requested by the government actually is to engage some kinds of projects under the government's policy. So two issues actually addressed based on, related to the geopolitical issues and then the impact. And so my very first, idea coming to my mind is what kind of opportunity or the challenges that the Taiwanese universities will really have to respond to that under the new geopolitics. And another one is how exactly is that the Taiwanese government's policy really shape the roles of the different higher education providers under this kind of the trend. So basically, I try to categorize, the Taiwan higher education development into before, the 2024, there will be 5 phases. Now we move into the new phases in the phase 6. So you could look at that in the 2005 to 2016. Okay, this is the era. This is the phase that the Taiwanese government tries to support higher education institution, particularly some selected university, to build themselves as a world-class university. But after the 2016, that we have the presidential elections, and now the opposition party to the administrations. So you see the focus shift from pursuit of the excellence to focus on the equity and the social responsibility. And the last year, we actually have another presidential elections that the new president actually have the different approach in higher education's policy. And you see a lot of the agenda probably quite related to their political ideology. And that really, for our observations, probably will really restrains the academic autonomy, and then also, institutional academics. Okay, not just autonomy, probably some kinds of the freedom. So I just briefly, go over what really going on. Before the 2016, actually, this is the former President Ma. In this 10 years, you can see they focus on the pursuit of excellence, and then they want to build more and more world-class universities. And during this period, the National Quality Assurance Agency, HEAC, was founded, and I was a former CEO of this agency, and I also focused on the internationalization to recruit international students, the foreign faculty members, and also provide EMI courses, and etc. But most important thing, policy for internationalization is the Ma administrations actually launched the open policy for Chinese students studying in Taiwan in 2009. So you could look at after this policy in 2011, because we just have the 1,000 Chinese students studying in Taiwan. But a few years later, in 2017, that the number, 10 times increased. But the policy definitely changed after 2016, as I mentioned to you, the different party to the office, President Tsai. So she launched the other policy initiatives to actually support the higher education development. The very first one is new southbound policy. The government tries to actually would like all the universities to strengthen their relationship, international cooperations with the university in ASEAN countries, and they would like all the universities try their best to attract the international students for Southeast and the South Asia. So you can see during this period of time, many students from India, from Vietnam, from Indonesia, actually that has been provided a scholarship to study in Taiwan. And the other project also launched that's called the Higher Education Sprout Project. Different in comparison to previous, we had the similar excellent initiative AEI, but however many focus on the excellence in research, and only selected university will be able to be awarded. But however, in this new phase, this new AEI, we also call the new national projects for higher education. Actually, the focus changed from pursuit of excellence to the student outcome, and also would like all university to pay more attention to their social responsibility and engaged in the local university, at the local community. And another project also during this period is actually launched by the government is bilingual education, and it would like all the Taiwanese university could really develop or strengthen their cooperations and partnership with the university in the Western countries. And moving to this year, you can see we have the new president, President Lai. He tries to take advantage of the Taiwan strength in industry by encouraging some selected universities, such as the National Taiwan University, the National Cheol University. They could set up so-called, very, very special semiconductor college. So that is one policy promoted by the President Lai. And another thing actually just happened in this few weeks, that is the local university actually are prohibited for cooperating or engaging in exchanges with 3 universities from China, mainland China, because they think that it tries to influence the young people, young population in Taiwan, whatever. And also, it's 2 weeks ago, the government announced another restrictions on academic exchanges with 7 Chinese universities because their roles in China defense and military technology development, etc. So that is, see that kind of the relationship between the Chinese university, in certain way has been really affected by this kind of policy. So based on, so you can see the transitions from the Ma, from the Tsai, and then from the Lai, and you could see this policy is totally a little bit different, but it all depends on their ideology, philosophy. So you could see how exactly is that the system, the Taiwan higher education system, been affected. You could see very first one is the big drops over the numbers of Chinese students. If you look at the number in 2016, it's more than 40,000. But now, the number drops to not more than 4,000. So this is a very significant difference than ever. And then another one also is about the rankings. They look at the 4 top research universities in Taiwan, including National Taiwan, Cheng, Tsinghua, and Yangming Jiao Tong University, because rankings really dropped from the 2003, 2005, and now you look at the 2004, their status really dropped, slightly. And then also they're forced to many private higher education sectors to be closed. One of the reasons is because they could not really attract the Chinese students coming to Taiwan. And then also that about the low fertility rate and the democratic changes. Those kind of things really drive very several private universities then is to closed. And then also another problems about the bilingual educations, because that is not very successful up to now, honestly speaking. And then I have some reflections based on, over the past probably 20-25 years in Taiwan higher education. You could find out that the significant ideological differences on education in the 2 parties really shape the government policy. But however, if you look at those outcomes, the consequences, it means the Taiwan higher education will actually are quite worried, becomes less competitive and less output oriented, maybe focus on roles. They may focus on the students and community is good, but how about those top research universities? Could they really continue to strengthen or even more globally competitive? And egalitarianism is one of the issues. This is why the educational resources and then the allocations of those resources are not be up to went to the top research university. And then another issue is the growing tensions between China, mainland China and Taiwan. Probably this is another very potential risk in the future, and then that probably will lead to more and more private higher education providers closure. And the very last one actually quite worrying me is about a new brain drain age is coming to Taiwan society. As you know that pressures by the Trump governments, the TSMC in Taiwan, the biggest semiconductor companies, they already announced that there were new investments over 100 billion US dollars in the United States in coming years. And also yesterday, Taiwan was hit severely by the tariff war. So I don't know, what else will left, after that. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Very insightful perspective from Taiwan. Now, originally we have another panelist speaker, Professor Shin from Seoul National University.
He's here.
Oh, I see it. Okay. Good.
Hello.
I see it.
Hello, Simon.
You can make it, Professor Shin.
Friends.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You can
Okay.
speak.
Can I start?
Okay.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Jung Shin. My original university is Seoul National University, but I am currently visiting professor at the University of Tokyo. It is a case of international mobility for me right now. Okay, I have some reflection and thought based on your talks today. We talked a lot about geopolitics. I would share one surprise news about Korean national president today. Constitutional Court dismissed him in the morning today. So it has huge impact on the international relationship between Korea, China, between Korea, Japan, or between Korea and USA, or in European countries too. So politics makes a lot of changes in international relationship. But when we talk about the political relationship or geopolitics, in my mind, economy, national economy and economic relationship is very critical factor to affect international relationship in geopolitics or whatever, even in relationship in higher education sector. For example, faculty mobility and student mobility, behind of the national policy, there is an economic interest between countries. So we may think about another dimension, geopolitics, as well as the economic relationship, as well as the geopolitics. Second point I would highlight is about in East Asia, we accomplished a lot during last 2 or 3 decades in economy and in higher education. In economic development, you can see them mainland China, Taiwan, Korea, Singapore, Singapore. These systems developed a lot during short period of time. But if you take a look at the higher education, in terms of mass education development, or in terms of the research development, we are also outstanding, right? As Kaho mentioned about it, and Simon mentioned about it, Wenqin also mentioned about these dimensions, so that we are very successful. But I would say, in East Asia, we are very much goal-oriented. so that if there is a clear target, we can make it in short time. If you take a look at the PISA or Times, or even in global rankings, we are high performers. But I'm not sure whether it has a good sign or also it has a negative sign to us, because education is not only about the economic development. The main goal of education is to help individual happiness or individual life, as well as social development or social contribution. So that we need to think about different dimensions. Education has its own goal, and also education may contribute to national development. Professor Yonezawa talked about one of very interesting topic related to Dr. Nonaka's knowledge or technology. We can import or learn some technology or knowledge from abroad through the published papers or published books. But the critical point for technological development is testing knowledge as well as the explicit knowledge. So that I guess each country may not open to other countries to protect their testing knowledge. You may get the point. The students who study abroad may learn something from other countries if it is published or it is written in book or it is taught in class. But if it is related to testing knowledge, they cannot learn it from abroad countries. So I guess that national policy in the future may focus on how to protect their testing knowledge instead of explicit knowledge, published knowledge. And I will share one other point related to student mobility. In my university, for example, many students do not want to go abroad as exchange students, although we have many students from abroad to study in my own university. So there's a balance issue between outbound and inbound. I don't know the main reason. Because of that reason, we are trying to address how to making balance between outbound and inbound, how to encourage our students to study abroad as an exchange student. That is one of my university's goal. And also, one interesting thing that I learned from Professor Ho Mok's presentation, he belonged to transdisciplinary college, right? Transdisciplinary means it's very difficult to communicate each other. Although we have a good collaboration with the colleagues in abroad, if we are in the same field, it's relatively easier than to communicate with the colleague in other discipline within one university. So we may think about collaboration means between national border and also between different academic discipline areas. It reminded me about Tony Beecher's book on academic tribes and territories, how to make cross communication with between academic disciplines as well as between countries in the same field.
So Shin, can you wrap up in a few seconds?
Hello.
Yeah.
I think it is all. It is the major point that I would like to highlight based on your talk today. So I'm gonna stop here.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I did not manage the time that well, so I think we can take a few questions. One by one, and I can fix them.
Thank you so much. I think you all made a very important point that's about geopolitical changes in the world. And Simon made a very important, I think is also a very interesting point that it's still difficult for the West to notice East Asia. Well, I think the recognition also reflect the power dynamic and notice also reflect the power dynamic changes and also the recognition. although there are many Chinese or the East Asia institutions are highly cited, but still I feel that is only a small portion of the scientific, like the world, or a small portion of the recognition, that kind of system. So my question is, like behind this notice, and what do you think are the reasons behind it? And is there any practice that our higher education researchers should do, or do we just wait until the time tells us what will happen in the next year? Yeah.
And can you identify yourself?
I'm Xiaona Wang from Oxford.
Okay, thank you. Simon, you want to make a brief response?
People don't shift away from their civilizational pathways easily, and to embrace the notion of multi-civilizational encounter or engagement, which is what we're really talking about, it's difficult for most of us. I mean, we are in a special bubble. We internationalize people. You know, we see in cross-cultural ways, we see multicultural sense, more than one cultural set at once. We don't do it very well, most of us. Those who are bilingual, trilingual do better than others. But, you know, most people are not in that space, including most people in higher education. So I think it's a matter of time to some extent. But, you know, the West is preoccupied by its own problems at the moment. And that makes it more difficult for people to think outside the box. They might have been doing that better 20 years ago. You know, when the US suddenly flipped from engagement with China on many dimensions and many fronts to hostility and decoupling in that, you know, short space of time, I think that showed how, you know, the engagement was still relatively superficial, you know, when it was lost. And slow, patient work in building bridges, of course, is necessary. Patience with the problem, I think, is essential. But if you keep doing very well at things, I think that helps.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Firstly, and then three.
I'm mainly for
Please keep it brief, okay?
yeah, I'm mainly for East China Normal University. I am very curious about given the geopolitical situation now, whether the East Asian country can strengthen their cooperation to move to the more regionalization. So I just wonder whether, because not only at the individual level and the institution level, whether the government level or is have some kind of move to more regionalized, like Asian countries,
Yeah.
for the East Asian countries.
Okay, any speaker want to respond?
Roger is one of the experts talking about the regional East Asian model from different aspects. My take is similar to what Simon has mentioned. There's a movement or some emergence trends promoting more regional collaboration. But I think if we benchmark regionalization, just like what happens in this part of the world, like EU, it requires not only about education collaboration, it's very much about constitution, about the political infrastructure. At that point, I think for the time being, I don't think we can go for this very structured regional framework as such. But it doesn't prevent us from doing more collaboration and government to government. Indeed, our government have dealt with the ASEAN countries not only in trade, but when you look into the data, the cultural exchange, student mobility, and also research collaboration and partnership. Indeed, the data speak a lot of multiple traffic between ASEAN countries and also China and the other two, Japan and Korea. So the more collaboration they found, the common interest, and taking time, maybe strengthening the framework, but not necessarily, in my opinion, we can go just like the EU. Perhaps Simon had other thoughts. This is my 2 cents.
Maybe we should hear from more.
Yeah, okay. Maybe teacher, President first.
Yeah, from Glasgow. Thanks for the very interesting panel presentation. I want to pick up on what Simon started with. Very impressive data, particularly longitudinally, how it changes. What I noticed is that it's also dominated by scientific publications. So my question for anyone on the panel is, in systems where the state is very large, what's the future for social science?
Shen, you want to respond?
Yes, yeah. I think maybe the semester data include social science.
Yes, that's
What is post data? It includes social science. But if you look at the separate about social science in China, and there's a colleague, her name is Zhang Lin. She published a paper about the rising of Chinese social science publication in international journals. And the trend is similar. The number of international publication in social science also growing very fast. And but it's not so huge compared to STEM fields, but increase. Yeah. And also relate to Li Mei's question about the regionalization. I think if you look at the journal, there's already some journal title as East Asia. For example, East Asia Journal of Science and Technology History of Science and Technology. There's East Asia Sociology there. But I think in terms of student mobility, it's not so good. For example, the Asian Campus project is not so successful as expected because it is a very high level initiative side by Prime Minister between countries, but it did not become a very big project as expected. Yeah.
Okay, I suggest we take a few more questions. So with gentleman question.
Hi, I'm Roger Goodman at University of Oxford. I thought it was a fantastic presentation explaining what the world looks like today. I just want to know what people think it's going to look like in 1 year from now. I've just come back from the States 3 days ago. I was visiting universities like Boston, Princeton, New York, Miami. I'm sure people know this. American universities feel like they're more under attack. This is what they say themselves than any Western universities have been since Germany in the 1930s. And we've already begun to see some of the impact here in Oxford. So our graduate application pool finished on January 15th. So that's only 9 days after Trump was inaugurated. We had the largest pool of applications ever. Huge increase in graduate applications. This week I've received a call for 2 associate professorship appointments. We generally in those posts would get between 60 to 70 eligible applications. One of them had 380 applications. The other one had 180. It was a rather specialist post. It only had 180 applications. Now, these are indicators that the world is on the cusp of huge changes in transmodal student mobility and academic mobility. We have no more capacity here to take more. We won't take more students. We're not going to take more academics. Are the countries in East Asia ready to take more students to be able to expand? I think the whole picture is going to change. I'd just love to know, you're the experts, what it's going to look like when we reconvene here in 1 year.
I completely agree with that, Roger. I mean, I think that this is the US stuff is not going to go away. It's going to deepen and spread, and of course you'll see the rollout in the red states as well with the public system as well as the private sector, which is more vulnerable in some ways at the moment. I mean, the fact that the administration has gone for the peak institutions, like Harvard's now begun a major way with its funding as well. And the DEI commitment is quite profound within the sector. So it won't be a simple matter to kind of root that out and just go back to business as usual, not at all. So, but the consequences for academic freedom are, so obviously there. And I thought, the Columbia events have been a terrible blow to all of us. Because we can see now that the sector is wide open for this kind of treatment. So I think the nullification of the German universities is the right analogy. It's the one we should bring forward now. There's some good work on that, historical work. The greatest universities in the world in the 1920s still probably being displaced maybe in the global role by the US, but science in Germany was fantastic still. In the 30s, they were ahead in physics of everyone else. But they were between 1930 and 32, 33, Heidegger becomes a member of the National Socialist Party and starts spouting anti-Semitic rhetoric and so on, and is kind of lost to philosophy. These are terrible kind of developments. And I don't know whether we'll see quite the same kinds of events, but I think that it's on that scale and it's got that importance and it's potentially long term. The German universities have never recovered from the from the events of the early 1930s. So this creates, yes, it creates a vacuum and it creates all kinds of mobility, but it's also, I mean, terribly destructive for the university as an institution. And that becomes something to focus on and shore up elsewhere, I think. So I think this is where you see the UK and US decouple a bit, you know, certainly in the university sector, hopefully so. But yeah, no, I think these are really major changes, and you know, it does free up the East Asian region. It gives it some more agency in some respects. But I don't think the American geostrategic interest in East Asia is going to go away. I think maybe even if Trump evacuates from Europe, East Asia will still be, that ring of bases around China, all of that will still be there, I suspect. But certainly countries have got more room to move than they have.
So Angela and JC or Aki, you want to make further responses?
Yeah, the form mentioned about the list of the Chinese universities that we do have a list on that, and so that probably the answer to the Japanese is that we social scientists have the responsibility to decide our future, and that is the kind of the message we should have. That we do have a kind of the within a kind of global geopolitics, and then the actually that under the Trump administration, I don't know what will happen, but still that we have a very cautious now to accept some types of the research from the, but we can change this but through the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, due to time, should we close the Q&A here? Of course, you can more chat over tea or coffee, but I would allow maybe each panelist 1 sentence to close out your whatever you want to say. Maybe I will start with Andrea from Taiwan first.
All
1
right.
sentence.
Yeah, just looking forward to more regional cooperations in the future in social sciences.
All right. So, Professor JC, Shin, you still online?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, in 1 sentence.
Next time, I may be join you through on site rather than online.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we start from Tahoe.
Yeah, Rogers, good question. We need a crystal ball in front of me, talk about next year. But in the current years, I think Hong Kong receive more application for Euro-Asia and mainland China for universities.
Okay, Wenqin.
I think as higher education researcher, we have more responsibility to research the current geopolitical issues and more important.
Thank you. Aki?
Well, thank you so much. That I really enjoyed kind of the very transdisciplinary and the very wide audience, not only for the education research, but over the field in Oxford. Thank you.
Okay, so the last 1 sentence.
I must say I very much enjoy Aki's paper. I thought there was a lot of cultural depth in that and lots of things to think about. But all the papers are great, weren't they? But and let me say, Wenqin's data I think were very salutary, very thought-provoking, and very worrying, of course. But this is the world we're in. But I think Ho has given us the overall perspective in terms of where we go from here, and it's worth looking again at his presentation about the practical implications that we're talking about, and maybe that's where we need to go next in terms of developing our responses. Thanks, Carl.
Okay, now as the moderator, I just give my final thought in a few sentences. I think things can never be going too far, too extremes. I think we always find a good balance of everything. For example, I can pick up from today. I think we need to find a good balance between the local, national development agenda versus globalization. For example, national competition, PPI. I think many countries still focus a lot on social equity, social mobility in their own country. So how you find the balance between the two, I think is almost, I would say, always important. And always we need to find a good balance between social cultural development versus economic purposes of higher education. And we need to find a good balance between public interest of higher education versus personal or institutional interest. And also, I think we need to find a good balance between the market-oriented disciplines, like what you mentioned about technology, STEM, versus humanity and social sciences. I think it's also I've been seeing some signs from some countries putting too much emphasis on science and technology and less emphasis on humanity and social sciences. And lastly, I think we need to put a good balance between competition versus cooperations. I think that's all the thing I pick up for today. I think I would like to ask all participants here to give a big hand to our distinguished panelists for the and on definitely we will see again in other occasions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.